Recently, in most developing countries of Africa, especially in Nigeria and Kenya, chance of we no go green and all we are saying give us more food, good governance, and demand for other important uh, social infrastructure has been on the increase. In today's edition of Politics and Leadership, we shall be looking at the issue of protest, and demonstration as whether it is an effective way of communicating the grievances of the populace to the leadership or to the people at the helm of affairs. All right? So today is protest the most effective way? Protest and demonstration. Is it the most effective way of communicating the disenchantment or disillusionment of the populace to the people in leadership position? Okay, so we will begin the discussion by looking at why do people or do social actors engage in these public demonstrations and street protests. For instance, in Nigeria, we recently witnessed the conclusion of over a week duration protest of aggrieved and disappointed and disenchanted Nigerians, okay, over what they considered as the biting hardship in the land, right? Also in Kenya recently, the same phenomenon has also been witnessed, where theirs has assumed a violent, dimension and proportion, where citizens are, fighting against the removal of a constituted government, the government that was elected by the citizens of Kenya. They have turned out and said that the government is not doing what they expect it to do, that they want the head of the government out. It has gotten to that extent in Kenya. So in other African countries, the same issue is also ongoing. So today, we're trying to find out whether there is a solution, a panacea. Is there, another way of solving societal issues, okay, that pertains to leadership, apart from, the street demonstrations and protests and, all this seeming or near pandemonium, scenario, okay? Yes. Do we have an alternative? Is there something that we can do that will be more effective than that? That is what we're considering in today's edition of Politics and Leadership. Now, we said we'll begin by asking why. Well, the first thing that we identified here is that people assume that street protest and demonstration is, the most expressive avenue, of venting their disappointment. That's because we run a democracy, remember, in most countries of the world today, and street protest is, the most the most common available medium, of venting one's disappointment. Okay, yes, and it is also a way of forming a united front. When there's a street protest or demonstration is called, by activists and leaders of thought, and it is seen as a way of gathering people together, people who are towing the same line of action and thought pattern, okay, to come together and unite themselves in fighting for a just cause, a seeming just cause. All right? Yes. Remember what they say in Africa, when people gather together and urinate at a particular spot or place, you could, see the efficacy of that joint or union, okay, of people or agreement of people that came together by way of what they call uh, forming of such urination. But that's not, by the way, okay? That's not what we are considering today. We are talking about street protest. So it's a way of forming a united front against oppressive leadership. And then another issue or another caveat that we have today is that it is, an avenue to draw the attention of the leadership of the government to the biting situation of the land. Because when you have people on the streets, okay, yes, even those who are feigning ignorance of the situation on ground would be forced, you know, to look backward and say, why are they on the streets? It's a way of getting the attention of, the people in, position of authority. And then it is also the most effective way of demonstrating the seriousness of the matter on ground. Now, having said that, the next aspect that we are going to be looking at is why should this protest, be called in the first place? Because they said there is no smoke without fire, right? Yes. What are the things that necessitate, or the factors that cause or trigger street protest in most developing countries of the world, right? That is what we're going to be looking at. Remember that in most cases that people who are protesting against, what they term as bad leadership. Okay? Yes. So why? It's often very clear. Government is often accused of being insensitive, right? Yes. This is evident in the major structures and systems of government, okay? We are going to be giving, examples today, not that it is peculiar, that the situation is peculiar in, these sectors that we're going to be mentioning, but it's just to, help drive the point home, to make it clearer, all right? So the inefficiency of government system and lack of effectiveness, all right? For instance, you have what is going on in the power sector, all right, where people are charged, money for electric bills, okay, and people complain most times that what they pay is not in any way commensurate to, the hours that they consume, or the number of hours that these companies supply power to them. So it's like, why must you such shortchange us? Okay, it's cheating. We don't like a situation where you compel us to pay humongous bills, and at the end of the day, we don't end up using the lights for which you charge us these bills. Okay, that's just an example, one example. Okay, so inefficiency of, public systems and structures. Okay, that's the number one cause that we have identified here in our peculiar situation in Nigeria. All right? Now, the second curse, or what triggers street protest, is, insincerity. People are complaining bitterly in Nigeria these days. People are complaining that there is too much hardship. Things are very expensive. To buy food in the market, it's as if, it will take you a miracle for you to, get a very nutritious meal for your family. Okay, so people who are working, the civil servants and all that, are complaining that the government functionaries, the high government functionaries are insincere. For instance, the legislators, they live in affluence and opulence, traveling abroad, are living in such a lifestyle that, contradicts, what made the electorate to elect them in the first place. They were elected to serve the people. But it's as if now, most of them have become very, unconcerned about, the people that, elected them in the first place. So it's a show of insincerity, all right? So we are suffering that way. And you're behaving as if you are not, aware of the situation on ground. Why must you engage in this kind of lifestyle while the greater percentage of the citizens are suffering? Okay, so insincerity. Now, the next point that we are going to be highlighting today is that of inflation, where it looks as if that our currency, it's seemingly worthless when compared to other currencies of developed climes of the world. We understand that it could be interpreted as a government policy to attract investors, okay? Yes, foreign investors who are coming with the dollars and the pound sterling. But you also consider the plight of the indigenous business owners, okay, when you are doing, because it's almost getting out of hand, all right? When you exchange the national currency to the dollar or to the pound sterling, it's as if, hey, is it a joke that we have here? Okay, when you look at the parity, the difference, it's so it's the inflation is, almost eroding, indigenous businesses, and people are crying very, very bitterly. All right. So, and then we have also identified the inequality embedded or inherent in the system. Right? Yes, inequality, where opportunities are not evenly, distributed according to merit. You know what happens in the civil service. Okay, for instance, the previous administration led by His Excellency Mohammed uh, Buhari, right, was constantly condemned, because of his kind of selective appointment, what they call parochial appointment that he made. But that's that, by the way, it's just an example, okay? Yes, it's just an example that we're citing. So it is as if the same issue is about to be recurring in the current administration, and people have started crying already. Please, we don't want a regional, based or lopsided appointment. Okay, please let it be distributed, evenly distributed to all the geopolitical zones, to all the interest groups. Okay, so that everybody will have a voice and be effectively represented. So these are some of the issues, that the protesters are clamoring for. We shouldn't continue to suffer where a select few are enjoying. That's just the conclusion of the whole matter, okay? But remember the question we asked when we started this discussion: is protest the most effective way of engaging the leadership of any country? All right? Because remember that when you engage or in this demonstration and street protest, it ends up dislocating and grounding the whole systems. Okay, yes. For instance, during that period of protest and strike, nothing was happening whatsoever. All right, the banking system was grounded, electricity grounded, everything grounded. All right, to the point of zero, where nothing is functioning or working at all. So what we're asking is there not another way that the grievances of the populace could be channeled to the appropriate authorities and get, positive response and results, and get the leadership to work, apart from demonstration and protest? That's what we're asking today. So we have identified and listed what we think would be the solution. Instead of engaging in protest, instead of engaging in demonstrations, let us look at alternatives that we have. All right? So that is what we are saying. Well, first, we have said that nothing is more beneficial, all right, than dialogue. Because after the protest and demonstration and destruction and grievances that's been aired, they will still return to the point of dialogue. So, why don't we start and maintain or sustain dialogue? The use of dialogue, dialoguing with the people in positions of authority, instead of going to the streets, going out there in the streets to, endanger our lives and then destroy, the little or few infrastructure that we have, in this country. So what we're saying is, let us look at strategic, dialogue, strategic dialogue, for instance. During the administration of former President Jonathan, there was this thing that they normally did quarterly. They call it town hall meeting, where stakeholders, instead of the legislatures now, you have stakeholders from interest groups, geopolitical zones, states and local government come together and engage the leadership in what they call media parley. That was the term that Jonathan used when he was in office, media parley. Quarterly, he will invite the people of the press, men of the press, and then strategic invitees from interest groups in this country to come and ask questions, in areas that, seem not very clear to them, okay? And I think that was very, very effective, in making the policies of government known to the people, okay? When people ask questions like that, you get to know what the government is doing, because as it stands now, it appears as if the activities of government is shrouded in secrecy. All right, we don't gain access to what the government is doing, and that's why you remember when the communication is breached, when this party, don't get to know what the other party is doing or the other stakeholder is doing. That's what causes this breakdown. All right, yes, in the relationship that we have between the leadership and the led. Right? So strategic dialogue instead of street protest and demonstration. So let's engage in strategic dialogue, and we have said the way to do that is media parley, town hall meeting, and delegation. Delegate people to continue to dialogue with the government, because we have found out it is. Remember, after all the demonstrations and all the protests, they will still return to the dialoguing table where they will dialogue with the government. So, why the protest? Okay, that's what we're asking. So, the second point that we have identified that will solve the issue of protest and demonstration is propose an alternative. let the NLC and the TUC and the ASU and all the bodies that go on strike and demonstration and protest propose an alternative instead of going on protest, street protest and demonstrations. Because, for instance, the problem we have in Nigeria today about subsidy removal that has triggered astronomical and increase in virtually the prices of everything that we consume in this country would have been averted if these interest groups like Panacea and IPMAN and there's ASUS and all those organizations had engaged the government before it, because you know how the announcement was made after the election. President Tinubu announced that there will be removal of subsidy. If these bodies that I mentioned, the IPMAN, the Penguin, the ASU, the TUC, the Trade, the other bodies in question came up with a solution that before you go on with these total removal of subsidy, could we have a period for like 1 year or 2 years where you would have to develop an alternative to the petrol, the need for petrol consumption in the country? For instance, the solar energy system, where we will have, for instance, in America and in Britain, they have electric cars. They are not bothered by the availability of petrol and all that. Okay, so the only alternative we could come close to in Nigeria today, as at today, is the solar, power generation system. We are not anywhere close to electric vehicle electrification system in this country. Okay, so we can't talk about that. So the alternative we have is solar. We should have proposed to the incoming administration then, please give us 1 year or 2 years. Use it to develop these aspects that will serve as as a cushion or buffer. As Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala would say, create a buffer that will cushion the effect of the policy you are introducing. So, but that was not the one. It was the policy was forced, and then before we know what will happen, it has started. So this goes both to the government, and then to the people, the interest groups. Okay, please, before other policies are introduced by this government or the subsequent ones that will take over, let us come up with alternative, proactive solution. Please don't start your policy implementation when you have, of course, they said palliative distribution of palliative, but it hasn't worked. Okay, it hasn't worked. So the biting circumstance is still there because there was no alternative. That's it. Okay, then we have also identified another point that if it's implemented, there wouldn't be this street protest and demonstrations in the country. Okay, yes, that leads to the near grounding of major structures and systems of the country that leads to economic collapse. Okay, so we said that the next thing is the same issue of sincerity. All right, yes, issue of insincerity is the most important thing that must be addressed. Those in key positions of authority, for instance, those who are administering the palliatives that the government has chunked out recently, they haven't been sincere. when you listen to the news, you will hear, how government has been, saying and announcing that we have imported so number trucks of rice to be distributed, but you don't end up seeing any grain of rice anywhere. All right, who are the people in charge? What are they doing? Okay, what happened to the palliatives? That's the thing, insincerity. That's why people are demonstrating. So if it is tackled, then there won't be need for street protests. Then, as we have said earlier, there is need for the Minister of Information to regularly make known the policies of government to the populace. I was able to understand the issue of the dollar to naira parity because I understood that it was what happened in Ghana. It was a way of attracting investment. Okay, but most people who do not have that information wouldn't understand what actually is happening. So, what is the information and communication sector of this present administration doing to make sure that the populace understand what their programs are and the direction they are taking? Okay, so that's it. And before we conclude this segment or this section of discussion on politics and leadership today, it is important that to note that we in this program discourage street protest and demonstration, because there are several demerits, disadvantages to it associated with it. For instance, during the NSAS protest in Lagos a few years back, lives were lost, and those people that were killed cannot be brought back to life. They've been lost, their lives been lost, and it's been lost. Nothing can be done. No matter of compensation would be commensurate to the lives that have been lost. So it leads to loss of life, destruction of properties, which we don't even have. The few that we have, we wouldn't want them destroyed. Okay, the infrastructure gap, deficit in this country is much. So the ones that we have, we shouldn't destroy them by ourselves in the name of protest and what do we call it, demonstrations. So it's why we are discouraging that. So, and then huge hoodlums, could hijack the process. It's actually during this period of protests that criminals and gangs and bandits, come in and then, inflict, more harm, to the system and to the people. So that's why we must have to desist from this, and it stretches, the system beyond, what it could, normally handle. All right, this is where we're going to be drawing the curtain today on politics and leadership. I hope that those in position of authority, as you heard what we're saying today, this was brought to you from It's Most Television, and we hope that the people concerned and who normally call for protests and demonstrations would look at what we have itemized, the solutions that we have proposed, and see whether if followed would be more beneficial and yield more result. Until I come your way again, I am MC Liki Liki saying bye for now.